20,000 civilians have been killed in Sri Lanka's final push against Tamil Tiger rebels, according to confidential UN documents, and government forces are being blamed for what's called a hidden massacre. The death toll, which dwarfs official estimates, is based on evidence ranging from aerial photographs to eyewitness accounts. Aid workers recently in the no-fire zone have told this programme they believe the figure is very credible. Our Foreign Affairs correspondent Jonathan Miller's report contains some distressing images.
Hell Beach, Sri Lanka. Many thousands of Tamil civilians were killed here as the Liberation Tigers of Tamil Eelam made their last stand against advancing government forces. Just how many, though, is what everyone's grappling with. In the fog of war, this area was an information black hole. Independent journalists and observers kept out. It was, as they say, a war without witnesses. The world's eyes and ears, Tamil doctors working in mobile field hospitals as artillery shells rained down. Citing confidential UN documents, the Times newspaper today claimed that more than 20,000 civilians may have been killed in what the government had designated a no-fire zone in the final days of the conflict, at the rate of 1,000 a day. The Sri Lankan government swiftly shot down this claim as baseless. Even the UN said the numbers were impossible to verify.
At the moment, it's really hard to know what were the level of civilian casualties over the last weeks, especially in the last few weeks of the war, when it's very difficult to get clear information.
But Channel 4 News has spoken to relief agencies, human rights groups and other independent observers who were forensically monitoring this conflict. Some had workers in the heart of the conflict zone right up until the final bloody push. They've told us that although hard to corroborate, the maths isn't that far out, and here's why. By the beginning of May, as government troops closed in, tens of thousands of civilians managed to flee the shrinking conflict zone, but tens of thousands of others were trapped. The Sri Lankan government claimed 40,000 civilians remained. Relief agencies we spoke to, with people still inside the zone, put the number at 100,000. This roughly accords with UN estimates from satellite imagery, based on the number of tents and the estimated number of occupants. Thousands more fled on the 16th of May as the last battle loomed. The government claimed all the civilians were out. But an agency worker who joined the exodus phoned his headquarters as he fled. "I'm crossing the lagoon now," he said. "I'm leaving with many civilians, but there are a lot left. The Tamil Tigers are keeping them." The question is, how many were still stranded? To figure that out, you work backwards. Of the 289,000 now in camps, the UN says 88,000 arrived after the Tigers' defeat. But we know that 100,000 were inside, so that leaves 12,000 people missing, presumed dead. Add that to more than 7,000 civilians the UN says were recorded killed in the first 4 months of this year, and you're at more than 19,000 civilians. This estimate then for the period since January, with around 2/3 of the civilian deaths in the final few days. So, 20,000 in total? Yes. Very feasible, said our sources in Sri Lanka. Very plausible, very credible.
There's always been a discrepancy between what the government claimed, the number of people who had fled the conflict area, and the number of the people that the UN claimed was still in the conflict area. So there was a question mark as to how many people still remained when the government closed this access by the ICRC. And the 20,000 to 25,000 figure is not surprising at all, given the daily casualties.
The UN Secretary-General visited the camps for displaced civilians, the survivors, last weekend, complimenting the government on its humanitarian role. Since then, the UN Human Rights Council's passed a resolution praising the Sri Lankan government for its defeat of the Tamil Tigers. This was a blow to Western calls for an investigation into possible war crimes by both sides. A spokesman for the separate United Nations Commissioner for Human Rights told us today they weren't happy. There should be an inquiry into what went on, he said. We know something bad happened, and we need to know more.